So today's post-show conversation is Preserving the Matriarchy, Bridging Intergenerational and Cross-Cultural Tension. We are joined by two special guests. One is Philip Nguyen. He's the president of the Union of North American Vietnamese Student Associations. Welcome, Philip. And we also have Christine Tran coming in, who is the managing director of the Vietnamese American Arts and Letters Association, whose mission is to connect and enrich communities through Vietnamese art and culture. Welcome, Christine. So in terms of the format today, what we're going to do is we're going to spend the next 30 minutes being in active conversation with each other. I have a lot of questions I want to ask them and they want to ask me. And then we will spend the next 15 minutes taking audience questions. So feel free to put in questions in the chat and Akemi from OACC will come back and feed them to us so that we can get to as many as possible. So that is how it's all going to go down. Philip, Christine. Y'all had watched 140 pounds. Philip in San Francisco at a funeral home that I did. Christine in OC at the Lieu newspaper headquarters in OC. What was it like to watch the sequel? What's going through your mind right now, or any responses to the reflection questions?
Christine, you wanna take it? You wanna take the lead on this one?
Yeah. It's so funny because, as you had mentioned, a lot of things overlapped. But watching it again, like I just can't push the feelings down. And I was writing in my reflection, like on what I was feeling. Like for me, grief always rises from the gut, like up the body, and then it sits here in my throat and I try to swallow it down and push it down, but it comes anyway and it flows over in the form of tears. And I think, but I do feel like this show's really different from 140 pounds too in many ways. And I really appreciated both versions.
I feel super raw. I don't know if you're feeling this too, Chris. I feel super raw. Like I didn't know what to expect for 140 pounds. And I think just like the last like 5-10 minutes of like seeing the images of your family members and the way that they like, you saw yourselves in them. Like, I know it was a theme that was like throughout the show, but I'm really thinking about like, damn, like how long it took between like and like kind of in the same vein as our the title of our conversation tonight, Preserving the Matriarchy. Like it's the 5th year death, and like 5 years after the passing of my Banoi, who is like my family's matriarch, and today happens to be Mother's Day. So I mean, there's a scene that like I particularly drew attention to that was about like, how your dad doesn't sing karaoke in the same way before, and how for me and my family, like I'm expecting to sing karaoke tonight, and I think it marks a sort of like passing of the grieving, or like that we will get through the suffering together. And in the same way, I feel like, I don't know, I don't know if y'all are feeling this out there, but I feel like I usually leave Susan, like I left the show in San Francisco, and I feel right now like more Vietnamese than I would usually feel on any given day. And I feel like that just like comes and goes with the feeling of both suffering, loss, and of like this immense love that I have for myself and my family. So I don't know. I mean, how do you feel after these shows, Susan? Like watching folks, like watching yourself and then watching folks react?
I mean, virtual is not the same as in person, for sure. I love to read the chat. I love the comments, the notes I get. I mean, it reminds me that the work I'm doing isn't just in my head and about my family, but it's about all these things that we are always feeling. Like, everyone suffers. Everyone wants deeper connection. Everyone is trying to figure out what is their purpose and how do they want to show up in life and what's blocking them from it. Everyone is feeling stuck somewhere in their lives. And the fact that I get to do this work, I mean, I am walking on my path and I'm so happy to do it. But at the same time, I'm rubbing up the fact that I'm exposing dirty laundry, and being Vietnamese, it's like grief and shame, and particularly shame. Like, I felt like I grew up with a lot of shame around my body, shame around the way my mom died, shame that I'm not female enough, shame that that I pursued the artist path. You know, constantly it's always just like the narrative is like not enoughness. And so frequently I'm always, every day I'm trying to like show up in the world and like be my best self. But I wake up with this entire narrative that I feel like I've carried on from lives before me. But then I feel guilty because I'm like, well, I have so much privilege. You know, growing up in America, like this is my normal. This is my native language is English. It's filled with a lot of guilt. But then when I get to come to these shows and I'm like, oh, was this meaningful to you? Like, did it add value? Was there a net benefit? Then all of a sudden I feel more secure in that. So I guess what I'm trying to tell you is I feel insecure, and then coming to this reminds me like, actually, maybe it does matter.
I feel you on guilt, honestly. Like I'm feeling a lot of that right now. Like I'm also thinking about like, and I'm thinking about like there's this phrase that my parents passed, like one of the last lines, like, you know, what do we inherit from our families, right? And my mom would always tell me like "Mọi người có cái số," right? Or like there is this destiny that we're gonna be fated to like follow, right? Or that we're gonna be like plopped into. And I'm just like, damn, like, and you're talking about like those that came before us and those that came like that will come after us. And I'm also thinking about like who sacrificed what for me to be here, and like why do I feel so guilty about it, you know? I don't know. Yeah. And I'm like, is this normal, right? Like is this feeling of guilt normal, and or is it just like, you know, like general survivor's guilt? Like we know that like hella people perished out at sea as Vietnamese boat refugees, right? And so I mean, Christine, what are you feeling, man?
On the topic of guilt, like, you know, just thinking about how in our families that guilt manifests and the grief manifests, if we even get to see or experience that, as you know, like a lot of our family members don't know how to talk about it or don't know how to process the grief. And I think like what is going on like underneath, you know, and if you're lucky enough, you have that one family member that overshares, and then this is like that connecting fiber that gets you to think about whatever it is that they're experiencing, and how do you ask them the hard questions, you know, that we want to ask. And like topic number 3, like who would you talk to, and like what would you ask, and like how. So there's a lot going on there right now for me, and it's like all sitting right here.
Right. And we're aging. We're the aunties and uncles. We're the moms and dads. We're now that generation, and our elders are going to be passing, and we don't like, do you have in your family home, do you have photos that are black and white of your ancestors and like you don't know their backstory?
Yes, where I was actually gonna bring it up too. Like when you did that show in San Francisco in the crematorium, you had like a bangta to your mom.
Yeah.
And I'm like, damn, like if there's like one thing that I want to pass on to my children, like I hope I remember who to put on the bangta and like who did what and how significant they were to my family, right?
And are those kids going to know those stories?
Right.
And so the question here is like, okay, you know, I know that there's been a big movement, like we want oral history, we want to like hold on to the past. And then when we ask these questions, we can trigger PTSD.
Right.
People are not in the place to talk about it. They have never even maybe processed it. Mental health is extremely stigmatized. So then where are you then? Like, I'm really curious, like, I know people have done a lot of workshops on this, but like, have you found in your own experience, are there certain ways to ask questions to gather those stories to preserve them that isn't resulting in defensiveness or mawadi or like, come on, like, stop, or like, let's just focus on the now, you know, which has its own merits, but what have you seen work? Because I just feel like there's such a movement, there's such a hunger to capture, but at the same time, it's like, are they picking up what I'm dropping down? Or did I just make them angry? Or did I just actually become even more distant? Like, crap, where am I now? Are they going to shame me? Are they going to name call me and then make me feel bad? Like, tell me, what's your experience like with all that?
I'll go first, and I'll start from like an organizational perspective. VAALA has been around for 30 years, and I think a lot of the themes tonight are really resonating with me. Our executive director, Isa, is always mentioning that the first generation of Viet artists are getting old and they're starting to pass away. And, one of the missions of VAALA is to preserve their work and to honor their work. But when we did one of our programs, which is Gallery Beyond Walls, and specifically for a project called the Illuminated Recipes Project, we use food as a medium for the participants to connect with their elders and their loved ones. And I think like that was a very easy way in, actually. And it started with the simple questions like, Mom, what's your favorite food? What did you like to eat when you were a kid? Or like, what do you have in Vietnam that we don't have here? And like, I want to taste it. And then like going into like just giving them the tools of the basic oral history number 101, start with a couple of interview questions, record everything, transcribe things, and come from a place of listening, and not feel ready to judge or to talk over folks, and just really try to listen intently to the story that is emerging, I want to say. And so from that program, I got to listen to 12 participants between the ages of 16 and 26. Some of them were first gen, some of them were second and third gen. And it was really, really interesting to hear all of their experiences and in being able to connect with their loved ones.
What I would add to that is start branching those questions. So in addition to, Mom, what was your favorite dish? It's like, hey, between your mom and your dad, what were their dishes that they were really good at making? Because you know how people are always like, they like to like strut their stuff of like, oh, I'm the one who's good at banh xeo, or that auntie does that. And if you can kind of like, it'd be like, oh, really? Why that dish? And I remember once it had gotten me down this like path where aunt number 4 used to like tape raw pork to her legs during the Vietnam War. And she would ride this bus and then go to another market. So she'd go to like the wholesale market and then ride the bus, but like she wasn't allowed to like bring meat in or like try to make money. And she would wrap it in tape and walk around with like raw meat against her legs. And like when I think about that imagery and I think about like Vietnamese women have large calves, and I'm like, dang, that must have looked a little like flares, like I think about that. And then I think about the dishes she's so great at. And so food, if that's our communication, our language, maybe that's another branching off point with variations and stories.
I think there was a point in over 140 pounds where you mentioned like the way that your dad expressed love is like very different from like just the American way of expressing love, right? Where I love you would be sufficient. The word thương doesn't really hit the same way, because when you say you thương someone, right, you're really saying that you're saying it as well as backing it up with everything that you do for that person as you care for them, right? As you like take the action. And so I'm thinking of this in between of like words and actions. And I'm thinking about like the reverse psychology tricks that I try to play on my parents. Like, if I'm gonna, like if I'm gonna call my mom and ask her for a recipe, like I really gotta FaceTime her and like show her that like I'm making the effort to like remember whatever it is that she's telling me, and then like do something to care for myself, because she would, like, and I'm thinking about love languages, right? Like if we could just sit our parents down and then get them to take that quiz, right? And like figure out what their love languages are, like I think it would make it a little bit easier. I honestly haven't done that yet, but I'm thinking about like, when we think about like generational difference, when we think about like, at least for those of us that like don't speak Vietnamese as well, like where's that connection that we have? How do we chat, right? Like how do we pay back what they have sacrificed for us?
Totally. Christine, I think that's totally a VAALA project, which is love language quiz translated, but with like when you have multiple choice, like, is it I made you fun thick, or whatever, like if the options were actually translated to the true scenarios that they would experience, That would be dope.
It would. It would. And how do I even tell my mom, like, I just need words of affirmation from you. Can you just give me words of affirmation?
I know, but what would thou fuck say here? Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's right. So, all right. I mean, I have a question. Because, like, what I've learned over time is, like, Susan needs to put on her adult pants and learn to have direct conversations with my dad in terms of setting my boundaries about stuff and telling him what makes me feel sad, like have the impact on me, asking for what I want, because he's no mind reader. And what I expect is kind of based around my privilege of what I've grown up with, not his life experience, right? So, like, I know I need, at the end of the day, I need to own up to the reality that I want with him. But being direct in Vietnamese culture has its pitfalls.
It's
right?
home. It's home to be direct.
Right. So can you help me with this? Because I'm second gen and I'm kind of like, I think I need to be more direct, because if I keep defaulting to 11-year-old Susan, we keep having the same recording, like the same drama is going to happen over and over again. So, like, I need to change, but how? It's like, I want to know that he is open to changing, right? Like, that he is also an evolving human being. He is not a one-dimensional figure. And if I continue to see him that way, I'm perpetuating a problem. But can we have directness now? It is 2021. Many of our parents have lived here for decades and they don't want to go retire in Vietnam. Like, they actually do call this home. What are your thoughts on directness?
One of my favorite Vietnamese phrases is nói khéo. And how do we translate that into English, right? To speak slyly, but sly, like, that's not the right connotation. To speak with intention.
Like cleverly.
Maybe.
Like cleverly. Like
cleverly. Like a fox. I don't know. But I think about this phrase of nói khéo when I talk to my dad, and he's like a tough one to crack, because he's actually like the really emotional oversharer for my parents, and I'll have to set the boundary with him, and I'll be like, Dad, like, I love you. You've told me this story before, but every time you tell me the story, it really, really hurts me. And in order for us to continue to have like these like weekly calls or monthly calls, you know, like, I want to hear about you, but I don't want to revert back to like the same old story every time. Or even
What's his response?
You know, it depends on the topic, right? When it's politics and it's touchy, and I'll just be like, look, Dad, because we don't share the same politics, and I'll just say, hey, I would rather have this conversation with you more than anyone else, because if in order to like talk to the community, if I can't even have this conversation with you, like, how would that reflect on me, right? Like, and I need you to teach me right now how to respond and like what to think about and other perspectives. And he's like, oh, okay. And then he'll go on and he'll start telling me more things and overshare.
Technology shit. I like it.
It's
about like honor and shame, right?
I'm also thinking about, like, you know, what if you can barely nói khéo, right? Like, what if your command of the Viet language is not as tactful? I feel like one of like my trick is that I try to get them fucked up, you know, like I try to get them to nhau, and I'm like over there like pouring shots for them, and like, yeah, like I've got, you know, like drink in hand, like ready to go whenever we have those tough conversations. And then, you know, I think my trick, like low key, is to have a Bluetooth speaker nearby and to start playing the oldies, right? Like the OG, like the song that you were playing throughout, Susan, right? Like the OG, like Tweeting Ab Bops. Because then, you know, if there's a lyric that comes up where they start singing along, maybe not necessarily like through karaoke, I can be like, oh, you know, like what does that lyric mean? And like, why did you choose to sing that? And then maybe that opens up a conversation. But I don't know, like I try that sometimes, but then at that point, like I'm also like a little bit too, you know, to start into any to do really shall, right?
Okay, so what I'm drawing from that is like use sensory cues, right? Like when I hear the song Gin and Juice, it's terrible, but I think about it. I'm 1993, I'm in 3rd grade, and I thought it was the coolest song ever, but it drops me into that time. And so the question here is, how do we use different senses to get them to a place or get them? It's I was saying in another show, it's just like, how do we find a creative new way in? But
it is, though, like drawing to the senses, right? Asking specifically, hey, in that moment when you left Vietnam, like what did your body feel like, or like what did things smell like, and trying to help them trigger that memory, but like not in a negative way. And I found that like with my grandma, that helps a lot. Like asking, okay, like, what time was it during the day, or how did you feel, or, what was going through your mind? And then she'll just like start sharing everything. So I think I'm very lucky in that part, that I have a handful of family members that are willing to share.
Yeah. Because what I find with sensory questions is they're not intimidating, right? Like, so instead of what I did that was so stupid when I started my investigation process about my mom is I would be like, where were you on the day of my mom's death? And they were like, what the fuck, Susan? And I was just like, and it was like, it was so bad. Other questions in was, hey, what did you do after school? Did you walk home with mom, or did you have a job? Like, that's such a different question to kind of get to where you eventually want to go.
I feel like that's been my segue recently. Like,
Walking home from school.
Like to get him to talk about like every like old, at least for like my pops and my uncles, like every older Vietnamese man thinks they're like the number one womanizer and like romantic, and like I recently have like been able to find a really happy relationship with my partner, and so I've been sharing. I know, thank you. I've been sharing my story, and I feel like that there's a part of the Vietnamese soul, like the collective Vietnamese soul, where we're like time travelers and teleporters, right? Like if there's something that like brings up that one memory of like when the first time that they fell in love, or like when your dad brought the crabs over, right? Like it takes them back to that moment, and it takes them back to that place. And I feel like if love and like if romance and if like putting myself and like our like me and my partner's story out there can like facilitate that, then I'm down with it, right? Because they're hopefully going to be the ones taking care of our kids somewhere down the line. And it'll be funny to bring back up those memories about how we reconcile these two times, right?
Those kinds of crabs.
The other kind.
Yeah. What else do you want to talk about? How do we preserve the matriarchy? How do we not forget who we are? How do we not become those black and white photos on the altar that no one actually knows our name and our story and our favorite dishes and our go-to karaoke song and that shit that no one wants to talk about, and if they allied with that, like, how do we not forget?
So a couple years ago, it's my 10th or my great grandma's 10th death anniversary, and I was really frustrated because I felt like I was the only one that remembered the date, remembered the significance of 10 years.
You're the one.
And I was like, why, like, Mom, like, why didn't you call the aunties? Like, you're the oldest, you're responsible. And I was just really upset. And I somehow came home that day, and my mom was like, hey, we're going to meet at your uncle's. And we go to my uncle's, and there's like Nga, which is like the usual dish for our family when it comes to Dam Yo, on the stove. And like, they did end up remembering, and it just happened. Like all the little kids don't remember great grandma, because I was the oldest. And then I tried to like awkwardly facilitate this conversation about like sharing stories about great grandma. And like, so my parents are divorced. My dad's side of the family is very Catholic. My mom's side of the family is very Buddhist. But one of the cool traditions from my dad's side of the family is that in addition to praying for every Dam Yo, they also do a round of storytelling from all the aunts, all the uncles. And then like as we were growing up, they would kind of put us on the spot and be like, what do you guys want to talk about?
And like, you're like terrified, right?
And you're terrified. And like I remember I was like 10, and they had heard that my grandpa on my stepdad's side of the family passed away, and they're like, do you want to talk about this? It's so weird, right? And I didn't grow up with my dad's side of the family, so like I'm visiting and I'm like sharing, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, but I really appreciate that tradition of like sharing from all aspects of the family. And so I try to bring that back to my mom's side, and I try to get us to sit down and talk about it. And it was awkward because the kids would be like, yeah, I heard this story, but like what else happened? And then you'll hear like an uncle who's like in the kitchen, or my mom like yelling from the living room, and they'll just like throw in, you know, random facts and random stories, but it worked. And so still trying to fight the fight and get these stories to be told.
Right. So what I'm picking up from that is we're of the generation to implement traditions. We're the ones that actually are in charge. And I remember, like, so I have this thing with my siblings every year called Extreme Indulgence. It's like a 5-day sleepover. We get crunk, we eat, it's great. All of us, our partners, are kids. And I was like, Auntie Susan wants to do an annual Christmas play. All the kids will have to design it. Who's the antagonist? Who's the protagonist? And then you can open one present on Christmas Eve. And they're like, why? And we have a couple of recordings. And you know what? They're going to thank me when they're 40. Okay. But the point here and all that is like, we're the designers and we have to consciously design. That's it, right? Like we have
intention.
And what you saw, and you're like, does this work or not? Do I like it? Will I pass it on? Right. So it's thinking about that. But the second thing I want to do, and I just keep bringing up all these VAALA projects, but like, wouldn't it be cool if you just made a manual for being old school Vietnamese and be like, okay, click on this link for lunar calendars so that you know how to translate this date of the death anniversary on this date to know this date. Or like on the 10th year, this is especially special and important, you know, or like how do we carry on the wisdom? Because even when I was postpartum, I had my baby. No one could come to my house because it was COVID. It was the first month of COVID. Okay. So like everyone was kind of freaked out being like, we don't know what this thing is. And I'm just like kind of trying to Google, like, how do you do the 21-day things, 40-day things? Like, what am I supposed to eat? And then at that point, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go Pan-Asian. And I like texted, I was like, hey, can your Korean mom bring me the seaweed soup? Can you know, like, I almost like didn't care because I live far away from my family, you know? And I was kind of like, I asked the woman I get my pedicures from, I was like, she was like, oh my God, you're going on walks? Bad idea. You're going to get like a cold chi. And she's like, when you're 40, you'll feel screwed. And I was like, what? I was like, can someone just put this in a book? She was like, no. And I was like, why? And she's like, no one would believe us. And I'm sitting there going like, you know, if I actually had that book, maybe I would have, I mean, especially since my mom isn't here, especially since I'm not with family, like, I actually think there's something very valuable about that of like, kind of writing it down and setting it to me straight a little bit.
Right. No, I feel like, no, I feel that.
No, run of show for dumb yo. Just give me run of show.
just hit me with a Google Doc and like tell me exactly, like each line should have like another Google Doc linked in there of the recipes of like what foods that, you know, the people that we're yoing for, right, their favorites were and how to cook them.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I mean, being Viet, and I think being Vietnamese American is like incredibly paradoxical, right? And that's in the same way that we're thinking about like Buddhists celebrating Christmas and like what Christmas stands for. But I think at the end of the day, like it boils down to like, you know, spending that time with our family and like even having the opportunity to have these conversations. On the topic of books, I mean, a subtle plug, but UNAVSA has been working with the Refugee Project, this guy named Jimmy Vu Patel Nguyen, and he's been doing that work of like collecting people's stories. We're recording family histories. I have like a secret recording of my dad talking about the olden days back in the motherland, right? And
that secret because you had your iPhone on record?
Yeah, I had it on record while he was just like popping off, you know? And, you know, I think we're starting to create our own anthologies, right? And we're starting to write down those stories that we heard growing up and the things that make us most Vietnamese or Vietnamese American or what have you, right? And I think, you know, like right now I'm getting people like my younger cousins like copies of The Best We Could Do, On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, and like The Sympathizer for Christmas. But I think it comes to a point when we're gonna be like, I feel like I would want to start getting the younger cousins or their children at Christmas, right? Books that we're writing, right? Or that our organizations are producing. Or I mean, I know Susan, you have a book coming out like fairly soon. So if you wanted to, I would want to pass that one on to you. If you could talk a little bit about that, you know, when that's coming out, which Christmas should I plan for, you know?
The Christmas of 2023, which is 2 years from now. So something kind of amazing happened was I had created 140 pounds. I was like, I'm in my second trimester. So that means I can only have a 3-month window to do a national tour. I'm doing it. And then, which was insane. And then, you know, I planned it out for 9 cities. And the first city is New York City. My lit agent, she heard through a friend of a friend that I was performing. I didn't know she was going to be in the audience, thank goodness, because I think I would have like totally thrown up backstage, like too nervous. She sees the show, she loves it. During the entire pandemic, we're working on a book proposal, which is basically a memoir. It would be 140 pounds expanded, talking about the nail salon, talking about my different family dynamics. And the working title right now is The Manicurist's Daughter. And it's going to be published by Celadon Books, which is part of Macmillan in 2023, the first half of the year. So maybe like that API month, I'm going to like really need some support to put on some events and things. So I'd say like Christmas of 2023, please buy them, or be one of those like people that like buy the pre-order and then you give them a gift and they open it and it was like, congratulations, like a donation was made on your behalf, and you're just kind of like, so you didn't give me anything? So like it would be like, congratulations, a pre-order was made on your behalf or something. Like actually that would be the most dope.
But then they get a signed copy later.
Yeah,
right?
sure, whatever. So let's do maybe December 2022. We can do pre-orders, you know? But like, so it's, anyways, it'll come out the first half of 2023. And like right now it's like, I'm transitioning mediums right now. So like that's a steep learning curve. I'm freaked out. But at the same time, I'm so excited because then you can tap in and jump in and be there any time of day. I don't need to specifically be there. I don't need to find childcare to perform for you. Like you can have all your feelings and take this space and time with thinking about trauma and healing. So that's due out then. Akemi, Q&A.
Hello, it's questions time. But thank you so much for, you know, cultivating this really, you know, thoughtful and deep, incredible conversation. I think if you could take a glance at the chat, we had so many, you know, insightful reflections, people really taking to heart prompts from your reflections, Susan, and also just responding. We had a whole sidebar on food, all of our shared love for food and how it connects us to family and memories. And I have been noting all the number of questions throughout, so I would like to relay them as they appear, just to honor the order of things. So we'll just jump right in, I think. All right, the first question I have is from May, and May was asking, do y'all have advice on how to work through immigrant traumas with a partner from a different background? For example, their example is their partner is not Asian, and I'm learning that there are traits I have from family that can make things tough for us as a couple.
Yeah, I'll go first. My husband's Korean American, but he grew up in Canada and Hong Kong, which effectively doesn't make him very Korean American, and he doesn't identify with being Korean. Like he doesn't lead with that identity. Do y'all get what I'm saying? Like I feel like I'm trying to be like carrying the Korean roots more. I'm like, here's a book, it's called Where's Harmony? And he's like, why do you have that? I'm like, read the Korean parts, you know? So I feel like maybe I can kind of answer that, which is like, he understands some subtleties of, I don't want to say like Asian culture or Asian communication, because Pan Asian is so different than specific ethnicities, but I would say I would group us kind of in this part of the Venn diagram, you know, of like how we approach certain things. And my advice to you is like couples therapy. Like, I mean, for me, I took on couples therapy during the pandemic, and we had like maybe 4 months of a session. And it was kind of like, because I'm kind of sitting here going like, I get so triggered about money and I get so triggered about food. And he does not. Like, it's like light years different. And that's actually the center of a lot of our disagreements and arguments. And it's taken like a third party to kind of help me kind of like see what I'm doing, or like put it in different language and terms that we can all agree on, or start noticing patterns that we can be like, oh, here we go again, you know? And I feel like for so long I've tried to explain to him, and for so long he's tried to explain to me. And at a certain point we just really needed a professional. And I'm going to tell you that it's just really made a difference to be able to hear each other in a totally different way.
Thank you. Any thoughts from Philip and Christine on that?
Therapy.
It's fine if you're still thinking through. We have a lot of questions, so I'll just keep hitting them at you. And yes, thank you, Johnny, for saying I co-sign on couples therapy. At first, I was not into it, but it's helped so much. So yay, if it works, that's great.
Well, I mean, next situation where you're like, well, we should have done that a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
Watch A Marriage Story with Scarlett Johansson.
Oh my God.
It'll and then you're like, which side of the line do we want to be on? Because I could see us on either way. Mm. I'm not asking for permission anymore. We're doing it. You know, that was me.
Word. I mean, at this, and also, you know, we're all, I feel like the 2 cents that I could add to that question are like, I feel like it's just understanding that everyone is traumatized in some sort of way by something. And I think when you understand that about one another, that's where maybe where you can start laying the foundation for some common ground.
Rude. Okay, next.
Awesome. Next question is from Tu, and apologies in advance if I'm not pronouncing correctly. The question is now more for Susan because it involves art. Now that you've been parenting art for a while, how often do you think of that conversation with your mom? Does it hit differently?
Oh, you mean like when I asked her all those questions? I
believe so, yeah. Like the conversation, yeah. They confirmed in the chat, yeah.
I heard the stairs come down, so I was like, oh, is that Art? And they just took a bath. He's really cute, like after the bath. How does it hit me? I guess it's like I don't need to know the answers anymore. You know? Like, I think for so long it was like, no one's giving me what I need, so now there's a void, and then there's an enemy, or there's an objective, right? Like, there's this thing that I know I'm not done, and that I'm not complete, and then now I'm just kind of like, what more do I need? You know what I mean? Like, having Art, like, he has healed some wounds. He gives me that unconditional love. He makes me feel a different type of purpose. And like, man, this journey that I've been on with him with the show, and like taking him on the entire tour, and like taking him up Mount Whitney, like when I thought we were gonna die, you know, like we've already been through so much, and like he's not even 2, you know, and I just feel like he's done a lot for me in my own growth and my own healing, and also I would say my own mental health, because there's something about having a kid where I'm like, I really need to be my best self, and I don't want to have him see me just like fall apart so much. And so like, how do I own that? And I think for a long time I used my mother's death as this thing, because I can't have that, then I'm not this, and it was so conditional. And then now that he's here, it's like the entire relationship of knowingness has changed, because what is there to actually know, right? And it's like, I know mom is here. I know mom lives on in Art. I know I can keep mom alive. I know because I've done this work that my siblings and my father have inevitably shifted. So it's not this like cry of pain anymore. It's more like these questions are beautiful, sincere asking that I hope others can ask and follow up on, and you know, get inspired to create the reality that they want to have with their family. I'm less restless about knowing her.
Thank you. My next question, which is from Nate, I think it connects really nicely thematically because I was picking up like feelings, also the trying to control or like find that, you know, a way to contain. So Nate's question was, feelings can be intimidating, especially when they feel like they can take us to places where we don't feel in control. How do we talk about feelings across intergenerational lines, especially when it can be hard to even express or verbalize them?
I have my thoughts. Christine or Philip, you want to go first?
I'm still thinking.
I would say, I mean, feelings are intergenerational, you know, like we feel things, our parents feel things. Like it took like 20 some years for me until I saw my dad Rocknukmak, right? And like to see him cry and to know that like, oh wow, like my dad isn't the superhuman, like hard ass, you know, that he like made himself out to be. Like there's also this Vietnamese saying ngoài cứng trong mềm, right? And even though like we grow up in like these like, you know, we get our ass whooped and stuff like that, like at the end of the day, like, you know, if we tie it back to love and we tie it back to like, you know, the way that once upon us, you know, we're in a lot of ways that we're fucked up because our parents are fucked up, right? And I think, you know, through understanding the ways that and the things that fucked us up, maybe we can stop perpetuating these like cycles of trauma and violence and harm, right? And we can start perpetuating these cycles of like healing and like building our community and like really understanding each other as whole people. Like I would say that.
So the translation of that phrase was, on the outside you're hard, on the inside you're soft. And what I wanted to add to that is I started doing silent meditation retreats 16 years ago. Because for me, my mind is always busy. It's always active. Like I feel I can never relax. And I'm also extremely emotional. I am extremely emotional. That's what I do for a living. I emote. And I think that with those feelings that you want to express to other people, I think part of it is like, what is your relationship to those feelings? And how do you get to a place, and I'm not saying suffocate those feelings or don't validate them or forget them or like move on. Like what I'm saying is like, have a relationship with your own feelings and process and feel them. Radically feel them through your body instead of like dismissing them or categorizing them or rationalizing them. Because when we do that, we have skipped a step in the processing of them. And let me give you an example. So I went to the silent meditation retreat, the first one, 10 days, my sophomore year in college. First time I ever meditated, which was so intense, okay? And so I'm sitting there and I didn't know what to expect. And all of a sudden I'm like thinking about my mother and my mother's death. And I am telling you, like, those feelings of grief went through my body for days. Like I felt like I couldn't walk. It was like, it was weird. It was crazy, but like I was like feeling and sobbing in this meditation hall. I didn't expect to, but like when I was so alone with my mind and my thoughts for a really long time, eventually I could hear me. Because so often I have layers of everyone else that I'm listening to, and then I could see me and feel me. And recently I got into a family conflict with a piece that I had created. It's banned now and taken down, so you can't see it. But like, it created so much controversy and I was so sad. And I was feeling so many freaking feelings about it. And guess what? The most important thing for me was not to go fight with their trauma, my trauma and their trauma, duking it out, because we were not going to get anywhere. And so what I've been doing is I've been reading Thich Nhat Hanh, I've been meditating, and I needed to get to a place where I really know how I feel about it. And then I can get to a place of where's compassion and where's understanding here? Where can I understand where this is caught? Like, what is inspiring them to react in that way? Right? Instead of like, well, he didn't hear me on this or blah, 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 blah. And then it's just like, we're not going to get to a productive place. And it took me about 2 weeks to get to a place of like compassion. Instead of like, you never hear me. Like, why can't I have my feelings? And so I guess I want to say is like, check yourself before you wreck yourself. Like, look at those feelings and see if you can have your relationship with those feelings, regardless of their approval or understanding and seeing you. Get to your place where you need to be with that. And then eventually with a different energy, which is curious, compassionate, and kind, can you come back? Because if you go in hard and hot, it ain't gonna go anywhere. Let me do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that really resonates, Susan, is just like owning and giving yourself the power to name those feelings and give them a personality, give them a name, you know, and have that relationship with those feelings because they're real and they're there and you can validate them. And it lives in your body, and it starts with knowing like where does it start to like manifest, so you can see them creeping along when they're being sneaky, you know, and then when you can understand that, you can also have a conversation with another person with this awareness, right? That hey, those feelings are there, but I'll talk to them later, and in that way be able to engage with whoever you're talking to in a more meaningful and compassionate manner.
Yeah, thank you for your insights. Just to be transparent, I know that we are under 5 minutes left for the original allotted time for this program. So I did note about 4 additional questions. I also wanted to give the audience permission, like if you have a hard stop, you know, in like 4 minutes time, that's no pressure. That's completely fine. I'm very grateful for the time that you've given and joining us in this space. I wanted to check with all of our speakers today. Would you be okay to continue fielding at least the 4 remaining questions?
Totally, let's do it.
Awesome. Okay, so for those of you who are prepared to continue on this ride past the allotted time, welcome. I'm going to start relaying the next question. And before you leave though, I'm going to start posting all the links. Please copy them over into your personal files to follow up on. Otherwise,
my personal files.
personal files. Like, I'm just imagining. I don't know how it would work on a mobile device. But anyhow, next question. Next question is from Johnny, who is asking. I think this is more of a Susan question as well. How did your family feel about you producing these 2 shows? What was the engagement with your family like throughout the various stages of the process?
Yeah, so what you see today with 140 pounds, that was the 4th iteration. I had done 3 small, I would call them episodes before then. And the first 2, I had taken the recordings, I brought them to Extreme Indulgence for my siblings to watch, and like 1 sibling showed up and the other 2 didn't, and it was like really freaking awkward. And it wasn't until the 3rd iteration, I invite my sister to come up to fly up from the Bay Area. She owns Sokola Chocolatier. And she watches it and then she's like, oh my God, like this isn't about you. Like I'm seeing people talk to you about the show and what it means to them. I'm like, yes, this is about other people. And she's like, this is not about you. I'm like, this is not about me. And it wasn't until we went to a spirit channeler in California, Cindy Clifton, she's the best, Windsor, she does virtual. And I had this conversation with my mom. You have to verify that the person on the other side is truly who you want to talk to by specific questions. That all my siblings actually heard that recording, including my dad. And then they're like, oh, Mom says that this is about greater work that needs to be done around healing. So I mean, that was very helpful to transform energy around it. And then eventually with the 140 pounds premiere, 2 siblings came to watch it. They were part of the post-show talkback. It was beautiful. They also came to the sequels talkback, and that was fine. Now, I'm still creating work. And so that piece that I was telling you about that was banned. It's called Dear Ba, a letter I would never send to my father. And my father, and I stupidly uploaded it to YouTube, and my dad, like Vietnamese elders love watching cooking shows on YouTube right now. And I guess I was at the top of his search, and he watched it, and it was about intergenerational emotional distance and the desire to be closer, and he was very confused, and it created a lot of mess. So the people who had supported me, because my dad and my other brother, they've never watched the show. That's their boundary, and I'm going to respect that. The people who had supported me all of a sudden felt a lot of feelings, and they became very protective of my father, who's very private. So that's what we're working through right now, you know? And like, I had to put my big girl pants on and like really hear them, also be direct about how I'm feeling about stuff. And it is an ongoing process. So the fact that I'm also writing a book creates this like new thing that like now, you know, post-vaccine, like I'm going to see them definitely during Christmas. And I'm just kind of like, oh my God, like, how are we going to do this? Right? Like, how do you be an artist and not censor yourself? And the fact that we're even talking about this, like shame and grief, is because we don't talk about this. We're not allowed to have feelings, right? So the very nature of my work is actually quite controversial in my family. So in the past, 2 siblings have been very supportive, and my aunts are very supportive on my mom's side. So it's just like an ongoing thing. But what I want to hold in my heart is that we're multi-dimensional people, multifaceted, right? We're not one-dimensional, and that we're always evolving and growing. But it comes back to me taking care of my feelings, checking myself first, and then how do I come in from a place of curiosity, and how do I truly hear them? Because if I'm leading with my ego, and then like just wanting my own success or information for the book or whatever it is, if I go in like that, then that's messed up too, right? So it's like really trying to tread carefully about my intentions, but in honoring my feelings and actually listening and honoring their feelings too. But then there's always a boundary, right? Like, I don't know about y'all, but I grew up as a black sheep in my family. Like, I've always been like pretty unusual. And I don't think I'm going to get their approval anytime soon. I'm just not. I still want it. And I still get butthurt when I don't get it. But then that's its own process too. I said the word.
Susan. I think the next question I think connects really nicely, and it's actually a question to all 3 of you. It's from Tu. Thank you so much. Piggybacking off of the reflections, what's a fear you have for the next generation of the Vietnamese diaspora, and or something you're excited about?
I already took airtime, so Philip, Christine.
That's such a good question, and I want to thank Tu for asking that. I think my biggest fear is loss, right? The loss of these little superstitions and these little traditions like that we're talking about that we want to preserve and honor, and like this cultural erasure and assimilation to being here. I think that's my biggest fear, the lack of art, or, you know, somehow our tiger parents have like scared us all into this corner of not wanting to create anymore. And so one day there's never going to be any more Vietnamese American stories or art to tell, which is not going to happen, because that's why our organizations are here and why we do the work that we do and why people are artists. But I think that's also what excites me, right? Because I've been very lucky to work with a lot of youth in the programming and work with future interns and future leaders. And I can feel the sense of care and intention that does exist, that they too want to share in preserving these stories and preserving all the feels.
I think in the same vein for me, what I'm afraid of, well, I'm definitely afraid of loss, like loss of culture, language, heritage, tradition. This feeling of muk gok, right, or losing your corners or like forgetting your roots is something that is like always feels like as though it was impending for me. I'd also say this feeling of comfortability is something that I fear, like for our collective generation, for our collective community. You know, if we're not going to be the ones to push the boundaries of what it means to be Vietnamese or Vietnamese American or Vietnamese in the diaspora, then we're going to be stuck, right? And that's a really scary thought for me, because I think, you know, it really doesn't speak to the way that we've been resilient, right? And we've been adaptable and we've been flexible, and that we've been able to make the most out of what we have. And one of the things that I'm excited about is the way that we in community keep ourselves accountable to that, to pushing those boundaries, right? And to not allowing ourselves to feel so comfortable that we stunt progress. Susan?
Said it all. It's good. It's good. No, but you know, I mean, I feel like there is, I don't know if it's like, you know, if someone like buys a red car, like all of a sudden you look out the window and you're like, I see so many red cars, you know? And like, since I became a full-time artist 3 years ago, I was like identifying as an artist, like totally all in, and like going to Divan event, and Pivot event, and VAALA events, you know, like all of a sudden I'm like, God, there's like so many people like doing this, like, yes, or like there's always a new book being published or a new thing, and I'm like, yeah, you know? So like, I don't know if it's because now that I'm embedded in it, I see it more, or that like the more we do, the more we encourage, and the more we have conversations, like the more people get inspired to be like, you know what? I am a poet. And you're like, yeah, you are a poet. And you're like, I am a poet, you know? So like, is it that? I don't know what it is, but I kind of feel like we know why our parents tell us not to do it. They want us to have a stable life. They want us to have the 401k or the benefits that they never had. I get it, you know? But then I also get like, if I don't do this, I will be sad. And I'm going to figure out a way. And I'm going to have metrics. And I'm going to have milestones. And I'm going to make this happen. You know, like I'm going to apply to grants. You know, and you're like, yeah. And you know,
Yes.
like, whatever it is. And I just feel like we know how the system works. There's like a turn in energy of like, hey, we want more representation, and you're like, yeah, I've been here the whole time, bruh, you know, like, but I feel like there's initiatives towards it, and then there's a turning towards allowing, and that hunger, and it's not just like Hollywood saying like, well, is this going to be profitable, you know? Like, I just feel like in general our society is just becoming more aware, and like it's like normalized in a way where it's like, why wouldn't you want diverse voices? Like, we don't have to say like, it's better for like success, you know, like we don't have to say that anymore. It's like, actually, like, we all belong, right? Like, are you a white supremacist? And everyone's like, oh no, I'm not. So then it's like, okay, great. So now there's more programs for us to apply to, and grants and all those things. So I just feel like there's this like this blossoming, because also it's also our own aging, where the way that approval piece of our parents is actually less impactful. It's still there, but that control is diminishing because we are also growing into our own.
Right, like a lotus flower from the mud, right?
No, I'm serious. Like, it needs garbage.
Yes.
Thich Nhat Hanh, like, stop it. I was like, I just want the lotus flowers. Like, just give me a shit, and like, give me a shit ton of flowers. Just give me the flowers, you know? But then he's like, here's an order of mud, and you're like, okay, I'll take the mud.
I feel like we're on the cusp of this energy that you're talking about, Susan, where like all these artists are finally emerging, and like we finally feel like our stories are being validated, and it's so exciting to see. And like when I'm doing the work, you know, for VAALA or as an artist, I'm always like, what if I had this earlier? When if I had this when I was 10, what kind of different person would I be?
Y'all have these like youth camps or like youth summer workshops things. And I'm sitting there, I was reading it, and I was like, damn it, I wanted to do that.
Yeah, we have youth programs that last 3 months, and all it takes is for somebody to show up, and we teach them the technical skills, right? We teach them photography, filmmaking, mixed media arts, poetry writing, all the mediums. And like, but I think the deeper work in it that starts to emerge is like all of the youth participants are sharing these stories that resonate so well with each other. In Illuminated Recipes project, we were talking about like food and like how we grew up eating like mama noodles all the time, and like how that connects for everybody. Yeah. And so I just think that sharing those stories matter, because there is a healing process to it, and we don't even know it until we actually do the work.
That's right. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, I know, I hated it when everyone was like, it's the journey, not the destination. I was like, oh no, it's the destination and I'm gonna get there. And it's funny because with the journey, not the destination thing, it unravels in its own way. And then all of a sudden you realize like, oh shit, the destination I thought I was going to is actually not that, but actually now it's okay. And it's like, but the more we cling to original expectations, doesn't allow us the magic to get to where we're supposed to go, your soul, right? Your destiny, your path. And so there's just something there around like, if we can all have more exposure to the things, what are we going to actually surprise ourselves with if we allow ourselves to give into the process? And this is hella funny because I'm like trying to write a book right now and I'm like banging my head against the wall. Kemi, what were you going to say?
Yes. I was going to say we have 2 more questions. I feel like both of them could warrant like another 20 minutes each. So I just wanted to get to those quickly before it got too late. The next question's from Regina, and she's joining us from India. And I want to give her a special shout out because she's been particularly, active in the chat and really sharing vulnerable thoughts and stories. So, I want to send a lot of love to her. So Regina's question is, I feel anxious about parenting. Being 18 years old, everyone tells me it's way too overhead for me to think about parenting, but it affects my life, my love life. I don't want to be my mom and my dad to my kids, so I'm afraid to be a parent. Parents love us, but the way they express themselves induces trauma. It did in me. What do you think about that?
Perfect segue. Regina, I have a podcast called Model Minority Moms, and it's me and 2 other Harvard Asian moms, and we just like get super freaking real. What was it like to have babies? What were our concerns? What is it what was it like to actually like find partnership outside of like this like weird romance that we're allowed to have after we get our master's degree, but we're not allowed to date in high school? We get really honest about the fact that as Asian females, we have to be a dutiful daughter. We have to be like a PTA, amazing mom. That stands for Parent Teacher Association. So like getting involved in your school. We have to like have it like be kick ass in our career. We have to be like super fit and have girls' weekends and like drink wine and and that's in America. But it's just like there's like so much that is constantly expected of us, and where's time for us? Or what if we're not okay with that? Are we allowed to not be okay with that? So we get super vulnerable and real about like just the real pressures of like trying to be everything for everyone. So I would say subscribe to my Model Minority Mom podcast. Philip?
I have to second that. Yeah, it's an absolutely incredible podcast. I figured out how to drop a review for you. So I can't.
So I'm like, review me, please.
So yeah, I also want to quickly just drop in the last question we have from Rachel, who commented, all of us seem to be asking the same questions to ourselves. How do we connect with each other and the Vietnamese American community too, as Susan says, design how our culture is remembered, passed along, and understood? That seems like a really nice closing question for us.
I'll go. And I think this is something that I picked up as a theme in the workshops that we do. And there's always this question of like, am I being Vietnamese enough? Or am I being American enough? Does that resonate with y'all? And like, sometimes I want to reframe it as like, what if you don't have to be either? Like, what if you can be both?
What if you're already enough?
Yeah, and that's already enough. And so being intentional, I think like creating a safe space where you can talk about these things, like in the space that we are today. Thank you, Oakland Asian Cultural Center, for facilitating. But going to your community, going to your families, your friends, where you can feel that safe space, where you are comfortable in your own skin, and that your story and your feelings matter. And if you want to produce work from that, then you produce work from that, and like that's totally okay, you know, because you are enough as you are. And I think like we all need to really feel that.
And I gotta say, like, I've done things on the outside that people are gonna be like, well, you're successful. And like, I gotta tell you that unconditioning, like unlearning, not feeling enough is still like a daily practice. I gotta say that. I gotta say that I never felt like I was Vietnamese American until like maybe my late 20s. Like I felt like Vietnamese Student Association in college. Like I'd be doing like the hat dance and everything like that, but I was like, you don't even know, my Vietnamese sucks. I'm like a second grader. And then I would always like call myself little kid, even to like tiny kids, you know, like it was like so freaking bad. It was so bad, and I was so ashamed, and it took my own journey of like being like, you know what? I am fucking Vietnamese, yeah. And it was actually when, and I'll say this also with Sokola Chocolatier, it's when we started leading with our identities of where we come from, that I felt more in my skin and more grounded. But it was my own journey to do. And I'm gonna say, like, if you were not like that Vietnamese kid that maybe would win the Vietnamese spelling bee and like did the great Ao Yai and like could be in the Vietnamese pageant and answer all those questions in Vietnamese and like sound like and be perfect and be all so Vietnamese, you are so not alone. And being Vietnamese is how you claim it. And I just want you to know that like maybe you won't get certain people's approval, but you can go find your tribe and you can go find your community. And there's so many amazing organizations and events out there, and all you have to be is you.
Word wholeheartedly. In Vietnamese, there's this phrase. I mean, to be a role model for somebody is to làm gương, or to be a mirror for them. And I think like the only way that I would answer this question is, you know, like it doesn't take Vietnamese people or Vietnamese things or things that, you know, Vietnamese-ness does not come from only surrounding yourself with Vietnamese-ness, right? It's about understanding each other, and it's about really seeing the compassion and having empathy for and really understanding the humanity in other people. And in that way, we reflect onto ourselves and then project an identity that we would want to claim as and be proud of claiming as Vietnamese. And so that's what I would say to them.
Yeah, or even commiserating about how your elders don't understand you. That's being Vietnamese.
All right.
I just want to add one last thing to Regina's comment about the fear of parenting and all that. I just want to add one last thing, which is I felt like everyone was like, it's going to be so hard. You're going to be the most tired you've ever been. Like, I felt like I got so scared into it. And like, actually, that's why I held off for a while, is because I was like, am I ready? Is this going to be okay? And I just want to say, like, it goes back to consciously designing it. I mean, yes, every baby's going to be different, but if you have a partner, when you have a partner, and I got to tell you, Regina, if you're 18, enjoy your 20s, girl. It is a buffet of life, and eat up, okay? Because get picky later. Like, for me, I felt like I was always in this place of like my Ken and Barbie dolls, you know, about like being together and being happy. And it was just like, what is that? And it was really about wanting somebody to come rescue me because I was not enough already. And I think when I got into my 30s and then I was later on in a relationship, I like look back and I was just like, man, I should have just kind of hung out and had fun and been like, I'm doing me. All right, if you're, you know, you do you, and if we're having fun, great. If we're not, fine. But like, let's also use protection, you know, like I think that there's something around just enjoying and exploring with curiosity instead of being like, hey, let's go on our first date. Are we going to get married? Like, how many kids do you want? You know, like, it's like, it like jumped to that so fast. And I think that's the conditioning of being a woman and thinking that your worth is tied to being married off because we were dowries for so long. So I just want to like look at that from a socio-political lens and be like, enjoy your 20s, Regina. And then also, people are going to say stuff. It's up to you to consciously design what you want. And for me and my husband, for our wedding and for having kids, we said, our theme is easy and hilarious. When we get to a crossroads, we need to ask ourselves, which option is easy and hilarious? I know it sounds ridiculous, but I heard so many people always getting in fights about their like marriage planning. And I gotta tell you, like, it's been helpful, and you're gonna find your own conflicts along the way, and things are not gonna go to plan. But there's something around, can I be in conscious design here? Because oftentimes we want to have control, but there is a point of like recognizing how much of what I'm thinking is actually a product of my upbringing, and then kind of separating yourself from that and being like, what do I really want? And I think I was trying to say that earlier about like, can you go back to hearing you instead of hearing all the other stuff? Okay.
That's wonderful. That's beautiful, Susan. Thank you for, I think that kind of helped us to come to a conclusion. I know, like, if this was in person, we could probably go long into the night. And I did want to recognize, I did see some new questions, but I would encourage all of you to really note, all of our screens have like the social media handles, and if you're more than welcome to reach out to the Oakland Asian Cultural Center or any of these organizations. We will get you connected to the right person and the right organization. So please, let's stay in touch. All I have for my closing words is, so much thanks to you, Susan, Christine, and Philip. Thank you so much for spending your Mother's Day weekend evening with all of us. I did want to leave a little space, Susan and Philip and Christine, if you had some final words or anything you wanted to share with the crowd before we.
Christine, VAALA has a Viet Film Fest, the largest film fest outside of Vietnam, and you're collecting submissions right now?
We are collecting submissions until the 15th, so there's like a week left, and it's going to be different this year. It's going to be virtual, so everybody across the nation will be able to access it versus having it be in person at a local theater like we've always had it. And it's 2 weeks long this year, so check us out in October, follow us. We also have a free screening coming up in June with shorts related to family. Which goes with the theme tonight, I think. And there's a lot of good stuff that's been lined up and carefully curated by our artistic director. So lots of cool things coming in June.
Sweet. What about you, Philip? UNAVSA, you also represent Devon and Pivot, like US,
Thank you for that. I mean, I just want to, my plugs, hit me up on social media at UNAVSA or at A Philip Nguyen. One of many that are out there. What do I have going on? There is a bunch of programming throughout APA Heritage, API History Month. So just check it out. I'll probably be on a Zoom or Facebook live screen somewhere, like drinking Hennessy. So come check it out, please. And then also just, thank you to Susan so much for having us here today and for your incredible weekend of Mother's Day celebration, and happy Mother's Day to you. So
thank you. Well, I have like one more event scheduled this month, but this was kind of my last screening of the year. I'm going to go into a cocoon and like write this amazing novel.
That's beautiful. And with that, thank you so much, everyone, for helping us bring our 5-show weekend to a conclusion. And I couldn't have asked for a better way to close this out. So much gratitude to all of you. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your weekend if you still have it in your time zone. And we will see you again in the future.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.